Welcome to the My Rules Are Better podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet. Today, lots of bits and pieces of unfinished business. Let's start off with the lead pile. I received an email from Martin Kearney, who is a listener of a podcast that I recorded, a Wargaming podcast I recorded maybe a decade ago. We'll just put a footnote in. I'll return to Martin Kearney in a minute. But Martin lives in Northern Ireland, and my preference is, based on the sheer volume, is to get some of the lead pile mainly to North American listeners just because it's easy through the mail. Now, I will find a few choice items and send them on to Martin, but he got in contact associated with the lead pile. So if you're a North American listener and you have an interest in taking some lead off my hands, please do get in contact. Give me your postal address up front. Martin, in fact, I think everyone who's contacted me associated with this thing send wonderful emails, which I can't complain about as well. But they forget to put their postal address in the first email, so it's usually a second email that has the postal address. So when you get in contact with me about the lead pile, please put your postal address in the email that you contact me with initially. The email address, Bravo Alpha Romeo, Bravo Alpha Lima Echo Tango @gmail.com. So the podcast of a decade ago that I used to record that Martin was a listener to, Martin has followed me. He is perhaps even slightly more of a zealot than I am. But Martin has followed me with regards to this notion that there's so much puff in the wargames industry. When I say puff, I'm talking about puff pieces, not anything else. It's just astonishing to me how much positive vigor goes into every possible wargaming system that comes out. There's not a lot of critical analysis. There's not a lot of, let's dig deep into these rule systems and see if they're actually playable. And what it means is, while there's clearly a very positive camaraderie kind of situation with regards to a wide variety of the manufacturers and all this other kinds of stuff, the rule systems are very rarely critically analysed in the publications. And when I did that on this podcast, or when I did that on the podcast a decade ago, there was trouble. There was real trouble. Like the gentleman who had a magazine at the time, who the podcast was nominally being sponsored by. I mean, I never saw any money from this guy. But anyway, nominally the podcast was being sponsored by this magazine. Well, as soon as I did, not even a negative review, just a critical review associated with the rule system, immediately then, there was hell to pay, basically. So my view is that Martin and I are like-minded associated with, let's look at this thing as something that's fun. It brings people together. But let's also look at it with a certain degree of, critical eye. Let's not just be, oh, it's amazing, there's a new rule system from so-and-so, and all this kind of stuff. I'm waving my hands in the air while I'm saying that. I'm realizing I'm doing it without actually describing that in the podcast. So, hats off to Martin. And Martin's continued the good fight. He really, when he has seen things that are questionable, he has raised these issues of question with the various participants that are doing these questionable things, and he has been blindsided and broadsided very similar to my experience with regards to this thing as well. So when I think of folks that are just doing the right thing, and he also sent me a box of squats, maybe, 8 odd years ago now, 7 years ago, because we just moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. So, well, maybe we hadn't. Maybe it was earlier and I only unwrapped it when we moved. Anyway, Martin and I have a long-standing communicative relationship, so it's really wonderful to hear from him and get a sense of, maybe he's giving a slight thumbs up to what I'm doing with My Rules Are Better. Let's talk about Just Playing Chaos, the conclusion of the Just Playing Chaos game at work. It was relatively anticlimactic because about 2/3 into the game, and this was the final game, this was the final showdown at the farmhouse. I had painted the farmhouse over the Christmas period, took it into work, had it all assembled, had the various participants. The battle was at the final stages. And then there was a work-related issue, and I had to say, I'm sorry, guys, I have to actually pick this up because I do it at work, and if there's work-related issues in the evening, I'm typically the one who has to deal with them, and it was that circumstance. So I said by general agreement, it was clear that the battle was nearly won. It was clear that it was going to resolve in a series of ways, but there was no real meaningful way that I could reassemble this thing in another evening. And I think all concerned were, understanding basically that when work-related stuff comes up, I have very little options but actually to do the work-related stuff. What I'm going to do is recycle a wide variety of the various bits and pieces from the Just Playing Chaos game to the upcoming Chechen game. I've had 3D printed some Chechen civilian figures. I don't know how I'm going to get those commissioned, but I'll find someone who can paint them in some kind of time frame. throw them into a box set with something else. And then sometime in September, we are going to start the Chechen game. Now, I've reached out to Chris Abbott, actually, because I would like to play the Chechen game with the Palladium rules as a standard role-playing game rather than a war game, or a role-playing game war game crossover, but make it more role-playing game than war game. And in doing this, I'm house rules and rewrites of rules based on existing systems, I think should be relatively part of the remit of this particular podcast. So I don't feel that I'm doing something unnecessarily against my rules are better in basing it on an existing rule system. What I'm interested in doing is kind of compare and contrast a more role-playing game rule system to the role-playing game wargaming crossover that I was able to do through Just Plain Chaos, with a view that we could also do the Chechen rule set based in the Just Plain Chaos rule system as well. But what I wanted to do to start off with is to get it more role-playing centric. And ultimately, if my co-workers are just not into that, or the Palladium rule system seems a bit extreme, or these kind of things, then we can move into other rule systems. But as a means of starting, and also because I'm coming back to the Palladium rule system with a sense of passion in some regard. That, this was a rule system that I enjoyed when I was much younger. I don't think I ever really played... we did play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, actually, when I was younger. I remember GMing a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game. And, so I do have some background with playing or running Palladium rules. What's interesting with the Palladium rules is that they don't map very easily onto real-world settings. So you've got ninjas and super spies, which is, I think, probably the closest rule system that I can use in the Palladium verse for the Chechen environment. You've got the compendium of military weapons, which is very useful here as well. So I think I have enough to start this thing, with the view that I can also create various skill systems around the mafia, which was big in the early Chechen conflict, the First Chechen Wars, and also some aspect to the religious component, which you can put in through Palladium as well. So the things that I have to sketch in, the elements that are going to be important for the My Rules Are Better podcast, is how I sketch in the mafia explicitly, which Ninjas and Super Spies has elements of, but not quite as well distilled as I want to do here. And then also, obviously, the religious component and some of the background history. Now, Chechnya has a very deep history and a lot of nuanced stuff, which I don't necessarily want to bring full front center to this game. I don't want it to seem completely alien. I want it to seem familiar in some regard. Now, the benefit of the Palladium verse, for want of a better term, is that all the rules exist on Drive-Thru-RPG that you need through this. So PDFs are available. And taking that plus a little bit more of my own stuff, I think could lend itself very easily to folks who were more interested in role-playing than wargaming and had been thrown slightly by more wargaming than role-playing with the Just Plain Chaos rule system. So as I record this podcast, I look physically at the box containing the miniatures from Just Plain Chaos. They are going to be put aside, put away, and will probably be taken out for folks that want to stop by and play this game. I'm interested in finding local folks that are interested in playing these games. And Just Plain Chaos is a relatively easy rule system to play out. So I've got the rules, I've got the miniatures, all that stuff is ready. I've divided up, I think, a vast majority of the scenery. I still have a bit of scenery at work that I've got to transport back, but the farmhouse is right beside me. So recompile these things into what will be used for the Chechen game and look at what the Chechen game will actually look like. So my time frame is to get it done in a September time frame, with the view that the miniatures should be back to me in a kind of July time frame, from what I've been told. And some of the miniatures are relatively brittle. I'm going to look at the miniatures that have the best possible sustaining force, which means less of the, they've got the RPG figures, which are just all brittle all the time. So I'm looking at more of the characterful figures to be part of this game. And in doing this, you have to set a narrative of like what happened through the invasion, the way in which things moved from historically a very, I don't know what one would call it, a very uniform society to a society where literally percentages of the population were, moving in different directions. It's analogous in some regards to a civil war, except obviously there was an external military that came in as well. So my thoughts are, in a September timeframe, that gives me 2 good months worth of having the miniatures and testing out the Palladium rules. I'm looking forward to Chris Abbott's feedback, actually. I mean, a lot of the stuff is already there for me. I just went to Chris Abbott because he has a long-standing, understanding of the rule system. He's met Kevin Zabita. I mean, he's spoken to God himself associated with this particular rule system. So I'm interested in Chris Abbott's feedback, and my hope is that he and I will record a podcast sometime in the near future. I also have a listener in Germany, Barney, who wants to record a podcast as well, and I'm interested in seeing his notes and ideas for this particular podcast. So we will have upcoming podcasts, and Matthew Gibson went to Greece, but I'm assuming at some stage he will also be coming back into the podcast. I need to get in contact with Matthew and see where he's placed. So these things are coming up with regards to My Rules Are Better, but I did want to talk about all of them in a relatively brief update. And if folks want lead, if you want to get in contact, feedback, questions, ideas, future topics, my email address, barbalay@gmail.com, Bravo Alpha Romeo, Bravo Alpha Lima Echo Tango @gmail.com. Thank you very much for sitting through this update. And we should be recording more associated with the Chechen rules, maybe a discussion with Chris Abbott, maybe with Barney. Let's see what fits into the feed next. I'm looking forward to it probably as much as you are. Tom Barbalay in the Bay Area, signing out.